This week on Under the Radar, yet another case alleging Google employs discriminatory practices with respect to its diversity hiring policies. So as you know on this channel, I've covered the James Damore case and the associated David Guterman case alleging discrimination by Google via its diversity policies against males, and more specifically but not exclusively white males with conservative or right-leaning political views. And just a few days ago, we learned of a new case which is now doing the rounds in mainstream media outlets, that of Arnie Wilberg, a former Google employee who has filed suit against Google after being fired for raising objections against Google's hiring policies, alleging that Google excluded white and Asian males from jobs in favour of diversity hires. Remember, as I noted in a previous video, if you are white or an Asian male, you are considered non-diverse from Google's perspective. Now, the usual disclaimers: I'm not a lawyer, I don't play one on TV, and as such I have no idea whether it can be proven that Google has broken the law. Same goes for the Damore and Guterman cases. But I don't think it's difficult to establish that Google has biases in its hiring policies. Whether they rise to the level of breaches of the law, I guess we'll find out in due course. There is now a 29-page document of the suit filed in San Mateo County available on ScribD. Check the sources for the link. So the plaintiff, Arnie Wilberg, was employed as a recruiter for the YouTube tech staffing management team for 7 years, the last 4 years at YouTube. I'm not sure what the distinction is there, but anyway, he was responsible for identifying qualified candidates for engineering and technology positions and recruiting them for positions in technology jobs at Google/YouTube. The plaintiff was an exemplary employee and received positive performance evaluations until he began opposing illegal hiring and recruitment practices at Google. For the past several years, Google has had and implemented clear and irrefutable policies memorialized in writing and consistently implemented in practice of systematically discriminating in favor of job applicants who are Hispanic, African American or female, and against Caucasian and Asian men. These policies were reflected in multiple bulletins, memorandum, charts, and other documents prepared by Google's highest level managers and approved by Google's C-level officers and directors. The stated purpose of these policies was to achieve diversity in the Google workforce and to manage public relations problems arising from the underrepresentation of women and certain minority groups in the Google workforce, particularly in engineering positions. For example, Google policy documents state that for Q3 of 2017, YouTube recruiters, including the plaintiff, would hire only individuals who were diverse. The policy document states, beginning in Q3, we hire for 2018 all diverse. Further, Google used weekly recaps to track the number of hires who were female, black, and Latinx. For the first quarter of 2017, Google's weekly recap reflected that Google had hired 14 females with a goal of 82, 1 black with a goal of 21, and 5 Latinx with a goal of 13. And here is a copy of that weekly recap, and no, your screen isn't blurry, the copies are just really bad. To execute diversity hiring program objectives, Google would carefully track the race and gender of each applicant for a position in its technology workforce and use these characteristics to choose which of the candidates and applicants for technology positions to make offers of employment and which candidates and applicants to reject. And here's an email from the manager of YouTube's tech staffing management team, Alison Alonia, in which she writes, and again the quality of the copy is awful: "Hi team, please continue with L3 candidates in process and only accept new L3 candidates that are from historically underrepresented groups." So for several quarters, Google would not extend an offer of employment for any applicants for technical positions who were not diverse, which Google defined as women, blacks, and Latinx. Google had a policy that recruiters were not to hire level 3 and level 4 software engineers. However, YouTube recruiters were given permission to hire level 3 and level 4 software engineers if they were diversity hires. Now, I just want to make a point about diversity as Google sees it. Here's a portion from the video I made on James Damore. Then in June 2017, Damore attended Google's Diversity and Inclusion Summit. The summit covered general topics such as how Google could increase its diversity. Specifically, the Google presenters went through some of their policies that were designed to accomplish this, such as treating preferred categories of people, women, certain but not all ethnic minority groups, differently during the hiring process by providing extra interviews and putting applicants into a more welcoming environment based on their race or gender. Well, that doesn't sound condescending at all, does it? The Google presenters also discussed putting diverse individuals into high priority queues so that they were more likely to be hired and hired faster. Google defined diverse individuals as women or individuals who were not Caucasian or Asian. So just remember, if you're a white or Asian male, you are not diverse. Doesn't matter what you've done with your life as an individual. By dint of your race and gender, you're a non-diverse human being. So as I mentioned earlier in this video, to be a white or Asian male means you are not diverse. Why? Presumably because you are overrepresented at Google in proportion to your percentage in the general population, and you are considered diverse because you are underrepresented. And so diversity, as Google sees it, just means underrepresented. But wrapped in the cloak of diversity, you are then relieved of examining why there's an underrepresentation. It's just received wisdom that it must be because of some type of historical discrimination that continues to this day, and that diversity hires seek to make up for it. But by that logic, it must mean that Asian males have received historic privilege. Now, I'm sure those Japanese stripped of their possessions and interned during World War II would agree with that. The obvious contradictions and sophomoric logic used to justify these policies are really astounding, and that's before you get to any of the science and literature on sex differences in preference and ability that Damore talked about. Anyway, back to the lawsuit. In April of 2017, Google's technology staffing management team was instructed by Alleging to immediately cancel all Level 3, 0 to 5 years experience software engineering interviews with every single applicant who was not either female, black, or Hispanic, and to purge entirely any applications by non-diverse employees from the hiring pipeline. The plaintiff refused to comply with this request. And so we get to the reason Wahlberg was fired. So Wahlberg repeatedly opposed these illegal and discriminatory practices and complained to his managers in HR by telling them that it was illegal to have such hiring quotas, that it violated state and federal law. In response, Google on occasion would circulate emails instructing its employees to purge any and all references to the race-gender quotas from its email database in a transparent effort to wipe out any paper trail of Google's illegal practices. Now, there are no exhibits in this document to substantiate that, but it would be very incriminating if they have such evidence, because it would be clear proof that Google knew what it was doing was illegal. Google repeatedly retaliated against the plaintiff for opposing Google's illegal hiring practices by subjecting him to unsubstantiated performance reviews, performance criticisms, and terminating his employment in November of 2017. So now I'm going to go over the prior 2 years' events leading up to Wahlberg's termination. In approximately December of 2015, the plaintiff's supervisor, Terry O'Connor, emailed the entire YouTube tech staffing team to tell the entire team that the goal for Q1 2016 was 5 SWE, I guess that's software engineer, hires per recruiter, and all of the hires had to be diverse software engineer candidates, which means they must be black, Hispanic, or women. Google internally and externally states that it does not make any hiring decisions based upon race, ethnicity, or gender. Well, actually, what Google does is talk out of both sides of its mouth. Consider the response from Google about this case as reported in the Wall Street Journal. A Google spokeswoman said the company will vigorously defend itself in the lawsuit. We have a clear policy to hire candidates based on their merit, not their identity. At the same time, we unapologetically try to find a diverse pool of qualified candidates for open roles, as this helps us hire the best people, improve our culture, and build better products. Well, I'm sorry, but you can't have it both ways. You can't say you hire candidates based on their merit, not their identity, and then say at the same time we try to find a diverse pool of candidates, because we know from your own policies that all diverse means is non-white and Asian males. It would be more accurate to at least acknowledge that identity is a factor in your hiring processes. So Wahlberg believed that O'Connor was disregarding Google's non-discriminatory hiring practices and felt uncomfortable reporting to her. In addition, O'Connor apparently yelled at recruiters in meetings and made them feel psychologically unsafe. Now, I really wish you wouldn't adopt the language of the emotional infants. All it does is reinforce the language of victimhood. In January 2016, Wilberg and 3 other recruiters escalated their complaints about O'Connor to her manager, and this wasn't the first time they'd complained about O'Connor's behaviour and management style. In retaliation, O'Connor gave one co-worker a poor performance review and a demotion, and another 2 recruiters transferred off O'Connor's team because one of them was uncomfortable reporting to O'Connor, and another co-worker reported being unhappy about the diversity hiring goals. In January 2016, members of the YouTube recruiting team escalated their concerns about hiring practices to their overall function boss, who was director of Google Staffing Services. They complained about the way both O'Connor and her supervisor, Pisacane, spoke about black candidates as though they were objects. Also, O'Connor and Pisacane ran a diversity steering committee comprised of recruiting managers at YouTube and YouTube engineering managers who were to review close call diversity candidates that didn't make the cut to hire them anyway, which contradicted Google's policy around a non-specific, non-separate and general process for hiring. This is something that Damore flagged in his memo as well. At around the same time, a black engineer reported that she felt uncomfortable because she was being asked to only interview black candidates. This complaint was escalated to HR, and thus the candidate tracker for the Diversity Steering Committee was deleted from the Google Drive, and O'Connor and others deleted all emails around diversity hiring goals from the YouTube technical staffing team's inboxes. The team was then informed by Pisacane that HR was investigating YouTube hiring practices and that their processes had to change. But Pisacane told Wilberg that these changes were only temporary and told him that YouTube would soon continue with the quota-based hiring practices. Pisacane told Wilberg not to share outside of the core recruiting team what the team was doing, such as sharing with recruiting coordinators. Now, I find that somewhat strange that Pisacane would confide that piece of information to Wilberg when she knew he objected to these policies in the first place. I think we need some more context around that. So despite a manager feedback survey in February 2016 showing that O'Connor scored an exceptionally low -30% satisfaction rating, Pisacane refused to replace her. So Wilberg went over her head and spoke with the Google technical staffing director and asked to change teams, but he was told to stay put while HR looked into it. Now, Wilberg told a few people of his meeting with the staffing director that got back to Pisacane, who told O'Connor, who then retaliated by not speaking to Wilberg and cancelling all weekly one-on-one meetings. When Wilberg told Pisacane, she said, "What'd you expect?" and failed to take any corrective action. Very professional. HR then did a follow-up with Wilberg and the rest of the team, and in March or April told Wilberg that all members of the YouTube recruiting team felt the same way about O'Connor. Jesus, what does someone have to do to get fired or demoted or transferred? At around the same time, Wilberg started seeing the on-site mental health counsellor for mental stress. Then in April, surprise, surprise, Wilberg received a poor performance review for the previous 2 quarters. Wilberg filed complaints, HR investigated and found O'Connor had acted in retaliation, and subsequently Alison Alogna, whose email we saw earlier about only making diversity hires, was hired to replace O'Connor. Oh yeah, great choice. And it turned out to be a nightmare. I'm not going to go over all of it, but suffice to say that Alogna was even worse than O'Connor, which is not surprising since O'Connor trained her. She was hostile to Wilberg from the get-go. In one incident, Wilberg stayed after hours to help a new hire prepare hiring packets because she had not been adequately trained by, you guessed it, O'Connor. For this, Wilberg was raked over the coals and told to find another team immediately. Wilberg actually did find a new team in San Francisco, and when he went to inform Alogna in their next meeting, he was confronted with a performance improvement plan, which according to Wilberg was full of lies and exaggerations and misinformation, mostly written by O'Connor. He refused to sign it, but he was put on it anyway. But because of his strong performance review at the end of 2016, he was taken off it after 3 months. But Alogna had also poisoned the well with the new team Wilberg found in 2017, and thus his transfer was turned down. Alonja told Wilberg in March of 2017 that he'd be fired if he didn't meet his diversity hiring goals, and Wilberg was not the only one that received that type of threat. One recruiter was told that her job was in jeopardy if she did not hire at least 3 black engineers in the quarter. In April, Wilberg went on a 2-week medical leave because of stress-related illness. And so that gets us back to where we started off, with Alonja telling the entire YouTube staffing team in April 2017 that they were for a time not allowed to hire any non-diverse and mid-level engineers. Thus, all interviews with non-diverse candidates were cancelled. Now remember, one of the supporting arguments in the Labor Board's advice memo that claimed Damore had created an unsafe work environment was that 2 female engineering candidates withdrew from consideration because of Damore's memo. Well, at least they had a choice, unlike these non-diverse candidates who had their interviews cancelled. In June of 2017, Google formed a group of diversity-only technical recruiters that were responsible for college recruiting, where the goal was to hire only black, Hispanic and women engineers, 80 in total for 2018. In the same month, Alison Alonja went on leave. A new manager took over, whom Wilberg and other members of the team found difficult to work with. Wilberg also complained that the discriminatory hiring practices had been resurrected. In October, Wilberg was given a bad performance review by Jae Jun. He alleges in retaliation about Google's hiring practices. Her review contained criticism from events that occurred in a previous review cycle. Now, has anyone else been noticing all through these events the agenda of these managers with their petty retaliation tactics, anger management problems, and general inability to get on with people? Yeah, me too. Anyway, Jae Jun went on leave for 3 months and Pisa Kane became Wilberg's manager, and he was called in and fired in November of 2017 for client escalations, not meeting goals, talking too much in meetings or mansplaining, and not being collaborative. These reasons, the complaint states, were all pretextual. So it begs the question, is Google still pursuing their questionable diversity hiring policies whilst claiming that they aren't? And I put the question again to young tech students at university. Does this sound like a place that you want to work? As usual, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'll see you next time.